Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Disturbing Reddit Post Iceberg. If you're not familiar with how icebergs work, we're going to start at Tier 1, which is, of course, just the tip of the iceberg. But as we work our way down to Tier 8, the Reddit posts are going to become more disturbing and increasingly obscure. This iceberg has nearly 100 entries, and I guarantee that I go deeper into the lore of each post than any YouTuber ever has in the past. So, in interest of watchability, I'm going to be splitting this iceberg into two parts. Today, we're going to be covering tiers 1 through 4, and in next week's video, we will cover tiers 4 through 8. As always, timestamps are in the description if you want to jump around. But without further ado, let's jump into Tier 1 of the Disturbing Reddit Post Iceberg. Content warnings are on screen now, so please pause if you would like to review them. Kicking off Tier 1, we have That Evil Farming Game. That Evil Farming Game started as a post on r/tip of my joystick, a subreddit centered around helping people locate games that they'd forgotten the name of. On April 30th of 2016, a user named Sparta213 made a post titled, "This game was kind of like Harvest Moon," where he described the game as follows. Starts out with you and your wife. One night you get into a fight, and you end up stabbing her to death. Now the game revolves around you farming to stay alive while trying to keep the town from finding out about the incident that happened. Every now and then the cops come to search your house, and you have to hide her corpse. Now the dark nature of the game caught the attention of both those who were curious and wanted to play it themselves, and also those who swore they had similar memories of a game fitting OP's description. The post resulted in a multi-year search for the game. Videos totaling millions of views were made where people tried to spread awareness and solve the mystery. A subreddit titled That Evil Farming Game was made, where hundreds of people combined their efforts sharing information and leads and talking about possible solutions. Some users reportedly spent over 14 hours a day searching for That Evil Farming Game. Unemployment sounds fantastic. But it wasn't until June 13th of 2021, 5 years after the original post was made, that the mystery was solved. The user made a post to Discord and Reddit suggesting that maybe the game didn't exist, and that Sparta dreamed the existence of the video game after watching a YouTube video where Vinesauce explained the imagined concept of a game similar to the one Sparta would later go on to describe. After reading the post, Sparta confirmed that he used to watch those videos while struggling with insomnia. He agreed the game was probably just a dream. So, the mystery was solved. That being said, some people still swear they remember the game existing for real. Maybe it does exist, and maybe one of you has even played it. Yay, video games. On September 8th of 2010, a Reddit user made a post asking for people's favorite mods in Elder Scrolls, to which user Yay Video Games responded, the uninstall button. The game is great and all that, but god, it is hard to fully remove all the junk it leaves behind on your system. You really need to check out that mod when the time comes to get rid of it. Otherwise, I think Askuro's Oblivion overhaul is a nice start. To which a deleted user replied, "What?" Prompting Yay Video Games to say, the uninstall button. The game is great. Ubisoft goes Steamworks bye-bye, always on DRM. But you oft go work, always on work DR. Check out the junk it leaves behind in you. The deleted user argued back with, this makes even less sense. Oblivion has an uninstall button. It works. I have used more times than I care to mention. All mods install themselves in Oblivion's directory. The uninstall doesn't touch them as it is unaware. All you do is delete the Oblivion directory. Then they gone bye-byes Jess? In response to this, Yay Video Games made over 4,000 comments in the span of just a few hours. All some iteration of, Ubisoft Go Steamworks bye-bye, always on DRM. Even stranger, each message had different formatting. Italics, bolding. Some of them even included hyperlinks to strange images such as these. One of these images even showed a quote in what is presumably OP's messy handwriting. He wrote, "Dreamworks bye-bye, always on DRM." Of course, people began to wonder, was this some kind of manic episode? Was this some ARG? What did this quote mean? The images represent something? Or was this just the ramblings of a madman? As always, Reddit sleuths were captivated by this mystery, and they gathered in hundreds to try and solve the mystery of Yay Video Games. Subreddit was made for them to analyze his comments and posts. YouTubers made videos looking for answers and raising possible explanations. The mystery remained unsolved until Christmas Eve of 2018, over 8 years after the mystery began, when Reddit user SoLegitHS made a post to r/yayvideogames titled, "I solved the mystery." In the post, SoLegitHS included a Google Doc which he claimed explained the entire mystery. Here is a quick summary. While going through YayVideoGames' post history, SoLegitHS found him posting in a tiny subreddit called r/cleanliness, which only had around 9 subscribers. While looking through the subreddit, they noticed a few other accounts with very similar posting habits to YayVideoGames. The main accounts were u/no substance abuse here, u/not sure how big you are, and u/vinyl record. After looking into these accounts, SoLegitHS found that they often appeared in the same threads. They replied to each other, repeated similar jokes or phrases, and one common pattern was several accounts making jokes about things being on vinyl, usually in gaming or hipster-related subreddits. Over time, it became increasingly clear that YayVideoGames had an array of Reddit accounts that he was using to converse with himself. Now, the account that stood out the most was u/not sure how big you are. This account had a much larger post and comment history than the others, including several comments that talked about personal issues. Looking through the account can give you a pretty good idea of who YayVideoGames really was. From looking at the post history, you can see that YayVideoGames was dealing with chronic fatigue syndrome, chronic pain, and was an ex-Jehovah's Witness. Here is one of his comments under a thread titled, "How do I get out of this hole? Well, this is how I endured the pain of recovering 6 lost years of my life due to sickness. Endured a terror that ravaged me with each step outside I took, that almost and occasionally did make me break down crying in a panic just because I was exercising. Pain that awaited me for hours during the day while I waited in bed with nothing to do except sit in pain, just so I could exhaust myself by walking a few blocks or lift weights for a few minutes, and then go back to bed and wait for my reason for being to come again the next day. The total lack of any enjoyable activity whatsoever, total inability to even feel pleasure, panic that drove me to waking so often I was sleeping in 2-hour blocks at a time, restless legs that has driven me crazy 24/7 for about a decade now due to human waste who called himself a doctor and gave a young teenager a dose of antipsychotics because, hey, why bother trying anything else first when the person in front of you is just a delusional idiot, right? A back that never, ever stopped aching, tearing me up on the level of a middle-grade flu that stiffened every single muscle. And, well, you get the picture. Here, this person you are now isn't you. You are a sacrificial lamb. You're nothing more than a proxy whose entire reason for existence is to suffer and work. This miserable wreck of suffering who has to slog through all the pain and the blood and shit and the fucking bone-freezing lonely cold is someone that progressed you is using in order to get back to where they were. You are a whipping boy. You don't deserve pleasure. Your sole reason for existence is to suffer through all of that progress they made all over again. You aren't even a person. You're a tool whose sole job is to serve the person who is sitting comfortably, sheltered from all of this, just watching and waiting for you to complete your work and die off. All I can say is that in my case, it worked. So it became clear that YayVideoGames was dealing with chronic fatigue and pain, among other mental illnesses. According to SoLegitHS, this was the explanation for his odd posting behavior on Reddit. For some time after this post, things went quiet. But in March of 2019, the final update to this story was made by user Luke McLeish as a post to r/YayVideoGames. In the post, he claimed that YayVideoGames' real name was Lyndon, and that he began suffering from chronic illness in 2005. When asked for the cause of death, Luke wrote, "Lyndon took his own life. I'm not too keen on sharing too many more details on that, as it brings back some really heavy memories and imagery, but we knew it was suicide as he left notes for myself, Chris, and his family. So, u/YayVideoGames is a mystery no longer. But I think the fact that it was a mystery for so long is actually a good thing. It has caused so many people, including myself, to learn more about how terrible chronic illness can be. Hopefully we can all be that much more empathetic going forward." Colby. The story of Colby began in April of 2012 with a post from user ConcernedDad1965 titled, "I think my teenage son may have sodomized our dog. I'm not sure what to do. Help me, Reddit. In the post, a father explains that his 7-year-old lab, Colby, had been acting noticeably different for the past couple of weeks. Colby was normally a happy, playful dog, but recently he'd become withdrawn, nervous, and almost depressed. So the father took him to the vet. After examining Colby, the vet told him that the dog had injuries consistent with sexual abuse. The father immediately started trying to figure out who could have had access to the dog. He thought about neighbors, gardeners, and anyone who may have been near their backyard. But eventually, he started to worry about someone inside the house, his teenage son. After looking through his son's computer, he found that his son had recently been visiting bestiality-related websites. This is the point when the father made his first post asking for advice. He said that he had not yet told his wife and had no idea how to handle the situation. After reading the replies, he decided to confront his son privately. At first, his son denied knowing anything, but after the father brought up the websites he found, his son eventually admitted that he had stuck a hairbrush and fingers inside of Colby, but that he did not actually have sex with the dog. He said he immediately stopped when Colby reacted badly. The father decided not to tell his wife. Instead, he made his son promise to never do anything like that again, and he arranged for him to see a therapist. His plan was to tell his wife that their son wanted to speak to a professional without telling her the real reason. Many people see this decision as a huge mistake on behalf of the father. While you can argue that he should have gone a little further and told the mother, I think we can all agree that this was a super tough situation to be in. It needed to be taken seriously to protect the dog and ensure that his kid didn't continue to behave this way in the future. But at the same time, if he lost his son's trust, he might not be able to get the truth out from him ever again, which could make the situation even worse. Whatever the case, even if he could have made a different decision, I don't think the father can be blamed for what happened next. 2 months later, the father returned to Reddit with an update post titled, I am the father and Redditor whose son sodomized our dog with a hairbrush 2 months ago. He's done it again, and I don't know what to do. Please help. Within the post, he wrote, This morning I caught my son in the backyard holding onto Colby's genitals while playing tug of war with him. Granted, this isn't sodomization, and the dog seemed to be okay. My son was basically grabbing and massaging the dog's privates as he held him in place under the guise of a tug-of-war game. Father confronted his son, they got into a big argument, and later that night the father decided to finally tell his wife everything. She was furious about her husband keeping her in the dark for so long. She left the house in a rage and went to stay with her sister. After another couple of months, OP made a third update titled, I am the father and Redditor whose teenage son sodomized our family dog Colby. It's been 2 months since the latest incident, and my family is falling apart. More inside. After the last post, the father and wife had continued to argue, and it comes out that, in conversations with his mother, the son has been denying that he ever sodomized the dog. Eventually, the wife ended up saying to the father that she thinks he was the one who sodomized the dog. This escalated to the point where they decided to separate. Despite OP's best efforts to protect Colby, the dog continued to live with the mother and son. The fourth update in the Colby saga was posted in September of 2012, 5 months after the initial post. This update was titled, I am the father/Redditor who lost his family after it came to light that my son was sexually abusing our dog, Colby. I have some good news for everyone. Colby is safe. But there is still the question of what to do with my son. In this update, OP goes to see his wife and son to try and fix their family. An argument ensues, which ended in OP's wife screaming, dog fucker, dog fucker, dog fucker, until OP left. A few days later, OP's wife called him crying because Colby had bitten their son badly enough that he needed stitches, essentially confirming that their son had been the one abusing the dog. After the call, the father went to the family home, confronted his son, and told him that he was taking the dog. His wife apologized and asked OP to come live with them again, but wanting to take care of Colby, OP refused to live with the family and instead took the dog with him and moved into a new apartment alone. After this, no new information came out for years. But in 2018, 6 years after the initial post, OP made one final update. He wrote, things are better. Colby, sadly, passed away about a year ago. But he was getting up there for a dog his size, and it was a matter of natural causes. I'm not sure I want to talk much about my son, but I'll say he and I are much better than we were in 2012 when the incident took place. It's not something we talk about with one another. I hope and pray he no longer fantasizes or concerns himself with this type of behavior. If he does, I wouldn't know about it since he lives on his own now. As for my ex-wife, well, she wound up in therapy after losing her job. Honestly, we don't communicate much, but I do not hear good things about what she's up to now. There are rumors of drugs and certain favors, etc. I don't really want to get into it for my son's sake. As for me, I've been with a new woman for a few years now, and things are much better. She has a son as well, and we get along just fine. I have to say, life is funny. Who would have ever thought my son putting something in our dog's behind would lead us all down such strange paths? Sometimes I wonder what life would be like if I had never caught him doing it. But who knows? Life is crazy, folks. Love your dogs. That story is just devastatingly disturbing, and it's not the kind of disturbing I like. I never like to hear about dogs being abused, but I am happy that Colby escaped that situation and was presumably able to live a happy rest of his life. The Cutchie's Key Lime Pie Rabbit Hole. The Cutchie's Key Lime Pie Rabbit Hole began on Reddit in 2016 when user Key Lime Pie WTF made a post to r/unresolved mystery titled Captain Cutchie's Famous Pie That Never Existed. In the post, OP explains that they were reading an article from their local college newspaper when they noticed a strange comment under the article. The comment had basically nothing to do with the article itself, but kept bringing up key lime pie, the military, and a person named Captain Cutchie. After Googling some of the names and phrases from the comment, OP and their roommates realized that this was not an isolated thing. Similar comments were scattered all across the internet. The posts usually mentioned the same handful of subjects: Mrs. Anita Pillais, Captain Cutchie Pillais, key lime pie, a restaurant somewhere in North Carolina near the Biltmore estate, and Key West, Florida. But the comments were not just normal restaurant reviews. They were long, repetitive, and weirdly written. Some seemed like recipes. Some read like advertisements. Some mentioned random celebrities or political figures. Many of them included sexual jokes or strange phrases related to key lime pie. Even weirder, these comments were showing up on pages that had nothing to do with restaurants or desserts. OP found them under articles, recipe pages, random media sites, and even a TMZ story. According to the post, the oldest example they found at the time was from 2009, and the most recent had been only a few days before they made the Reddit thread. At first, OP was not even sure if Cutchie's was a real place. The comments referred them to a restaurant called Cutchie's Key West Bar and Grill, or Cutchie's Key West Cafe. There was very little information about it online outside of those bizarre comments. The Redditors started digging. They found business listings and property records connected to locations in North Carolina. They also found that the property was connected to a man named Oswald Pillais and his wife, Anita Pillais, which matched the names that kept appearing in the comments. Reddit users found that the comments were posted under many different names. Some were fake-sounding names like Jake Carson, Roger Ramsey, Jenny McMasters, and other random aliases. Other comments were posted under the names of celebrities or public figures. Users also mentioned that the comments all had a similar writing style. They used the same subjects, the same strange phrases, and the same weird obsession with Cutchie's key lime pie. But they were not always identical copy-pastes, which made people wonder whether it was a bot, a person, or some combination of both. Now, there were a few main theories. One theory was that this was all a part of some spam marketing campaign, but that doesn't really make much sense when you think about it, because Cutchie's had already been closed by the time people were finding many of these comments, and the comments were still continuing. So someone was advertising the restaurant. There wasn't really anything left to advertise. Another theory was that the comments were just the result of a bot. This would explain why the comments appeared in so many different places. But many of the comments were specific to the pages they were posted on, so if it was a bot, it probably had some human involvement. And remember, this was before we had things like ChatGPT. A bot didn't have the necessary knowledge to read a post and make a relevant reply, much less include key lime pie and jokes and riddles and things of that nature within that relevant reply. There were also theories that the comments were coded messages, mostly because they were so repetitive and strange. But as far as I can tell, no one has ever proven that there was any actual code hidden inside them. Years later, Oswald Cutchy-Pelaez Jr.'s obituary confirmed that he was a real person and that he and his family owned Cutchy's Key West Bar and Grill in Arden, North Carolina. The obituary described him as a chef, artist, and sculptor, and said the restaurant had been the place to be for over 3 decades. But to this day, the online comments are still unexplained. 2 broken arms. 2 broken arms refers to a Reddit post titled, "I am a man who had a sexual relationship with his mother." This post is an Ask Me Anything thread where a man explains that when he was 14 and his mom was 37, they began a sexual relationship that lasted for many years. It started when OP had 2 broken arms, and his mom decided to masturbate him since she figured he must have been pent up. And that's just, I don't even think I need to explain how disturbing that is. That's creepy in a way that I can't, that's otherworldly creepy and gross and disgusting. Here are just some of the creepy things I found while reading through the thread. In the pinned comment, the moderators confirmed that the sexual relationship between OP and his mother was real. OP provided proof to verify with moderators that he was the subject of an academic paper on incest. OP's father knew about the relationship from the start and was in full support of it. There are also several comments where people say they don't understand why people think this is wrong, and multiple comments where people said things like, "This whole thing gave me the weirdest boner." I don't think I need to explain why this is messed up to any of you. And so many of the comments were people asking questions like, did you do this position? Did you do that position? What did this feel like? What did she say when you did this? Did she moan? It's completely fetishistic, and it's so concerning, not just for the incestual angle, but also the fact that he was a kid when these things were taking place. Whether he understands it or not, or whether he's fully come to terms with it, and he comments in the threads multiple times that he thinks it was a positive experience. Regardless, he was being sexually abused by his own mother. And this is absolutely terrible, disgusting, gross. This is not something that should be treated as okay. All right, let's go ahead and jump into tier 2. Surely things can't get any worse. Starting off tier 2 hot, we have poop scissors. I think you can see where this is going from the title alone. Poop scissors is one of the less serious entries on this iceberg. It's disturbing more so because of how gross it is to think about, but not so much that anyone does anything harmful or wrong. On February 20th of 2022, Reddit user DemonSlayer007 made a post titled, "You've all heard of the poop knife. Let me tell you my story of my family's poop scissors." Within the post, OP recalls when he was 8 years old and his aunt, Daisy, came to live with his family for a short while. One day, OP's mom was taking a little longer than usual, and Daisy walked up to the door and shouted, "Do you need the poop scissors?" When OP asked Daisy what the poop scissors were, she explained that in her childhood, they had these rusty shears they kept in the bathroom. Whenever they would go to poop, they would cut off the turd halfway through to lessen the load on the plumbing. What makes it weirder, though, is that the scissors were apparently a family heirloom. They were passed down from generation to generation. Years later, when OP went to visit his great-grandmother in Chicago, he saw the scissors hanging next to the towel rack in her bathroom. When OP asked Daisy if those were the poop scissors, she said that it was the exact same ones that they used to use when she was a child. OP now lives the persistent fear that one day the poop scissors will be passed down to him. This is obviously disgusting, but I think the original poop knife story is worse. I read it several years ago, and I wish I didn't. The story is from an r/confession thread posted by user LearnedBut in January of 2019. Basically, OP explains that when he was young, his family had a poop knife because they all pooped really big, and it could be hard on the toilet. It wouldn't always go down. When he was in his 20s, he had to poop at a friend's house. He did, of course, a big poop. Now, because it was so big, he was scared of flushing it whole. So he opened the door to call over his friend. Assuming that everyone had a poop knife, he asked his friend where the poop knife was. Now, there were several other friends in the house, and everyone started dying laughing. And that's when OP realized that not everyone had a poop knife. But of course, his wife always had a poop knife, right? When he got home, he told his wife the story of what happened that night. And that is when she realized that the knife that she and OP hung in the laundry room, that she usually used as a basic utility knife, for opening boxes or whatever, was actually OP's poop knife. To me, the most disgusting part of the story is that they kept the poop knife not in the bathroom, but in the laundry room, where they washed their clothes. Is that not disgusting to you guys? Is that not disturbing? What else could you ask for from a disturbing Reddit post? The Jolly Rancher story. I actually first read this post when I was still in high school. I was in this phase where I was just spending all day reading no sleep stories and then searching on Google for the most messed up Reddit threads. And this is one of them that came up. I'm pretty sure I almost threw up in the back of my history class. It's become one of those stories that most people who are on Reddit too much have read at some point, usually because someone warned them not to read it. So, warning, you shouldn't read this, you shouldn't listen to this, it's pretty disgusting, but I'm guessing that most of you who have stayed this far are going to listen to every single word. It's a short post, so I'll go ahead and read the whole thing. Steve and his girlfriend Samantha went off to college in August. She went to Florida State, he went to Penn. So, she decides to fly to PA to visit him. He was really happy to see her, so he decided to give her some oral action. He had done this numerous times before, and he always enjoyed doing it. But for some reason, this time, she smelled really horrible, and she tasted even worse. He didn't want to offend her, though, because he hadn't seen her in months, so he put a Jolly Rancher in his mouth to cover it up, even though it didn't do much to help. In the course of eating her out, he accidentally pushed the candy inside of her, and then he stuck a finger in to grab it out. He took it out and put it back into his mouth, and bit it. Only it wasn't a Jolly Rancher. It was a nodule of gonorrhea. As in, the blister-like structure that gonorrhea makes filled with diseased pus was the size of a fucking Jolly Rancher, and the poor guy bit it. Yes, it was really dark in the room. He freaked out and started vomiting all over the place when it exploded in his mouth. He demanded to know what was going on, and it turns out she had cheated on him at a club like the first week of college and fucked some random guy, and the stupid bitch had no clue what was wrong with her. She had noticed the strange smell, though. So now, Steve is freaking out that he has gonorrhea of the mouth, and God knows what else. Jesus fucking Christ, I forgot how disgusting this was. Oh God, I feel like I can taste it. Let's just move on. Let's go ahead and move on, and I'm sure the next entry will be a lot better, not disgusting. It'll be great. The Cumbox/Cum Coconut. In August of 2017, a Reddit user, Coconut Throwaway 69, posted a thread titled, "Day I fucked up by coming in a coconut." This is another one that I read while still in high school. If you can't tell, I spent a lot of time on Reddit when I was supposed to be doing schoolwork. I wish I could go back to a time before I read this one. Anyway, this is another short post, so I'll go ahead and read the whole thing. This TIFU didn't happen today, but quite a few years back. For obvious reasons, I'm using a throwaway account as my family knows my main Reddit username. Anyway, around 8 years back, I lived in northern Mozambique, a coastal southern African country with quite a warm climate. My mother at the time was going through a health nut phase and only buying foods she deemed healthy enough. One of these was coconuts. She would buy several coconuts a week to use in food from the local market. Anyway, being a horny teenager, I fapped in regular intervals. Unfortunately, there was some severely stressful examinations coming up for me, and as such, my fapping reached a higher peak than usual, and I was feeling pretty sexually frustrated. One day I hear that my mother is going to be out for pretty much the entire afternoon. Horny me decides that it would be a fantastic idea to fuck a coconut. Honestly, to this day, I can't fathom why I thought that would be a good idea, but my train of thought back then was clearly somewhat clogged. I end up grabbing the coconut drill, and through 20-ish minutes of effort, end up creating a hole large enough for me to stick my porker into. I decided it requires some lube, so I grabbed the nearest slippery thing, some butter, before shoving it into the coconut, followed shortly by my meat. Jesus fucking Christ, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? I fuck the coconut, and it actually feels pretty damn good. So I blow my load, shove the coconut under my bed, and continue about my day. How could you not just throw it away after that? You just fucked a buttered coconut, dude. Do you not think it's gonna, like, turn rancid? How is the post-nut clarity not hitting like a fucking brick? If I ever did something like that, I'd be so disgusted with myself. I don't think I would ever stop. Again, I think I would bleach my fucking penis, dude. For the next week, the coconut is my savior. Whenever I want to get off, I simply take it out and fuck it in its delightfully tight hole, made better each time by accumulating volumes of my semen and butter acting as a lubricant. It's heaven. Now, before I continue, I'd best mention that at the time, our area was experiencing quite humid, muggy weather, which exasperated an already existing fly problem. Disgustingly fat, bloated flies were commonly found around our house, and the exterminators couldn't really do anything because it was a localized area problem that would go away in the winter. About a week and a bit after the initial coconut fuck, I had been using it pretty much every day since then. I began to notice a few more flies than usual, as well as an odd, unpleasant smell about my room. Must be the coconut, right? So, I decide that I'll fuck it once more before I throw it out and get a new one. Worst mistake I have ever made. Word of advice, guys. If you ever think to yourself, I'm gonna do something only one more time, that means you know you shouldn't be doing it, especially if it involves your genitals. So just don't do it. You see, the reason for this increased number of flies was that the coconut was, evidently, in hindsight, a nearly perfect place to lay eggs. As I penetrate the coconut one last time, I begin to feel a strange wriggling sensation. Puzzled, I pull my cock out to discover that it is covered in rotted and moldy butter and semen and teeming with tiny fucking maggots. They were wriggling all over my dickhead, and some were even trying to force their way into my urethra. I screamed and threw the coconut against the wall, which made the situation worse by spilling the contents. Hours of vigorous cock scrubbing, vomiting, and cleaning the remnants were spent reflecting on what the fuck I was doing with my life. Never again. Never again. TLDR, don't fuck coconuts. I, for one, didn't need to be told that. I kind of never really would ever consider doing that. And I hope none of you would either. I really hope this is the end of the gross out posts. I really didn't sign up for this. On the bright side, this post did win Fuck Up of the Year of 2017. And honestly, winning Fuck Up of the Year on a site like Reddit, where the worst fuck ups imaginable happen hourly, is an incredible feat. U/Worthless319. U/Worthless319 is a Reddit account created on December 25th of 2016. That's Christmas, guys. And I think it's funny that everyone I know always refers back to 2016 as the best year of their life. And Christmas of 2016, by extension, must have been an amazing day for most people. But you'll see that it's a little bit different for this user. Like EA video games, this one is not really centered around one specific post. Instead, it's centered around the user themselves. The account first gained attention within communities like r/morbid questions, where Worthless319 was repeatedly making extremely alarming posts. Here is just one example of a post titled, "What are some of the ways I could sever the stump of my penis? Shot off roughly 90% of my cock and have a little stump left. I'm looking for ways to remove it. 1. Band it up, then shoot it off. 2. Penis guillotine? Not sure if enough left. 3. Try to slice it off? Least desirable option. 4. Dip it in liquid nitrogen and smash it. Any further ideas, please comment. For pictures of the stump, DM me. I'm not sure if I can post them here, as they're highly NSFW. Yeah, no shit." When someone commented, "Holy shit, are you serious?" U/Worthless319 replied, "Yes, I shot it 4 times with a revolver, cooked it on the stove right after, and then ate it. This, of course, sounds like bullshit, but when someone asked for proof, Worthless319 obliged. Obviously, I can't show the pictures here, but they look pretty legit. Like, I actually saw these images, And it's not gory. He's more so showing the aftermath after it's recovered. So it's possible that it was just some kind of natural injury, and then he decided to play it off as this weird story. But whatever the case, I think it's pretty clear that this guy did have his penis turned into a stump. Going through his post history, you can see that prior to this post where he was asking for advice on what to do about his stump of a penis, he had several posts asking about local anesthesia, asking what drugs he could take to inspire him to mutilate himself. And there was this recurring idea in the post that he believed that he had been chosen by God for a divine mission. It was to sacrifice parts of himself in order to serve God or prevent some kind of apocalyptic event. Specifically, he referenced a nuclear war with North Korea. This is so disturbing and depressing because it's really not ridiculous to believe someone could have these thoughts. There have been many cases of people having similar delusions. The real question, I guess, is whether he followed through with them. On a lighter note, my personal favorite post from Worthless319 was one where he asked, why or why not would alcohol be a decent anesthetic for performing self-surgery? Someone commented, I know what you're thinking. Don't do it. I saw your post on morbid questions, to which Worthless319 replied, damn, it feels good to be a gangster. But more seriously, the scariest part of this whole account is his last post and comment, which starts off wholesome and then takes a very, very dark and disturbing turn. He posted this really cute picture of his dog on r/aw, and people started talking in a subreddit that had been created to discuss Worthless319 about how it seemed like he was getting better and just living his life with his dog. But then Worthless319 popped into the thread and said, it's an old pic I'm reminiscing upon as I'm stuck on a bus for 2+ days to get my revolver. I'm halfway across the country because I found someone that would murder me by cutting off my cock, but they would have mutilated my corpse unwillingly and eaten me, so I opted out. This was Worthless319's last ever activity on Reddit. No one knows what's happened to him since then. All we know is that he's disappeared, and he probably won't be coming back to Reddit anytime soon. Some people believe the account is a hoax. Others believe everything is true and he actually ended up committing suicide. He's been inactive for 9 years, so we'll probably never know. Eric and Annie is a public relationship that played out across Reddit over several years. The story begins in June of 2013 when user Eric R made a post to r/r4r, Redditor for Redditor, a dating subreddit, and the post was titled 44M4R, which means male for Redditor, meaning he was looking for a date of any gender. Sonoma County or San Francisco Bay Area, dinner on Friday, June 28th. I'll treat 1 or 2 other people. Later, Eric and Annie would refer back to this as the pizza post, a slang that they created, which essentially just meant the post where they met. The user named Annie ended up replying, and although she didn't live close enough to actually meet up with Eric, she liked the way he wrote and thought they might get along. However, there was one major boundary from the beginning. Annie had a significant other, so she did not want to move the conversation into private messages. Instead, she wanted to keep things public in Reddit comment threads so that the conversation remained transparent. I don't really understand how that makes sense, but to the two of them, it did. So they started using public Reddit threads as their own private chat rooms. They would reply back and forth to each other, sometimes for months, until the thread was archived or became unusable. Then Eric would make a new thread, which they called a new branch, and the conversation would continue there. This allowed everyone on Reddit to follow the relationship in real time. At first, the conversations were fairly normal. They talked about music, daily life, jokes, Eric sailing and racing, and whatever happened to be on their minds that day. But over time, messages became much more personal and affectionate. One of their threads, titled Eric and Annie's Branch Mark III, had over 27,000 comments between the two of them. And as the branches continued, it became pretty clear that this was not just a casual friendship anymore. They referred to concepts like this life and second life, with the idea that maybe in another version of life, they could have met under better circumstances and been together more easily. But the problem was that their relationship existed in a very awkward place. Annie cared deeply about Eric, But their relationship was still online, public, and complicated by real life relationships. They loved each other, but since they lived far apart and Annie was already in a relationship with someone who she was, of course, cheating on with Eric, they couldn't be together in person. Eric talked often about the possibility of finding someone in real life, and Annie said that she wanted that for him, but she couldn't handle hearing about it. This is ultimately what ended their relationship. Toward the end of their final real conversation, Annie explained that when Eric talked about other women or potential in-person relationships, it hurt her deeply. But at the same time, she did not want Eric to hide that part of his life from her. She wanted him to be honest and wanted him to be able to pursue happiness in real life. The issue was that full honesty also meant she would keep getting hurt. Eric tried to find a way around it. He offered to limit what he said about other women and tried to reassure her that the connection they had still mattered, but Annie seemed to believe that the only real solution was to step away completely. Eventually, Annie told Eric that she was turning away from the branch. This was her last ever Reddit activity, but from there, Eric did not move on. Instead, he kept returning to the branches, writing messages to Annie even though she was gone. Sometimes he would post updates from his life. Sometimes he would link trips or sailing-related things that reminded him of her. Other times it seemed like he was trying to continue the conversation by himself. He made threads with titles like, "Still keeping a place for Eric and Annie," "The branch continuation again, always for Annie," "Another shadow branch for Annie," and eventually, "The last branch Eric can make for Annie." Around this time, he also made a post to r/self titled, "With any luck, this is the end," with texts referencing suicide by alcohol poisoning. Because of posts like that, many people assumed the worst. When Eric made "The last branch Eric can make for Annie," commenters began leaving messages like they were afraid he might hurt himself. Some people even began saying that Eric had died, but there does not seem to be any proof of that. In fact, the rumor appears to be completely false, because if you go to Eric's Reddit account, in December of 2019, long after the final branch was posted in June of 2018, Eric commented on an unrelated Ask Reddit thread about how people came up with their usernames. It was a normal comment, and several people immediately replied in shock because they had assumed he was dead. Because of how strange the whole situation seems, people have come up with several different theories. Some people believe Eric and Annie were actually the same person using two accounts. Others think it could have been an ARG, an art project, or just some kind of troll. But there's really no strong evidence for any of those theories. Both accounts had separate histories. Annie's account existed long before Eric's, and the sheer number of comments made it difficult to believe someone would fake the entire thing for years with no real payoff. Personally, I think the most likely answer is that this whole thing is completely real. Just two super weird people who met each other on Reddit. When Eric made those posts that seemed to imply self-harm, he either meant it but was able to recover over time, or he was simply trying to manipulate Annie into responding to him again. Lake City Quiet Pills. Lake City Quiet Pills is one of Reddit's oldest and most complicated mysteries, and involves a dead Reddit user, an image hosting website, hidden messages in HTML, possible military word codes, and, depending on who you ask, either a secret assassination network or one of the strangest, longest-running hoaxes in internet history. This is way too much to cover in an iceberg video, but if you'd like a deeper dive, please let me know. Nexpo also has a great video on Lake City Quiet Pills, so if you're interested, go check that out. The story of Lake City Quiet Pills begins with a Reddit user named Religion of Peace, also known as Milo. He claimed to be a 79-year-old military veteran, and he was active in a lot of different Reddit communities. His comments were mostly a mix of political opinions, military stories, technical advice, arguments with spammers, and a lot of porn. He was also a moderator of r/jailbait, which was a subreddit centered around sexualized images of underage girls, which was eventually banned from Reddit, as it should have been, along with anyone who interacted with the subreddit. In May of 2009, Religion of Peace made a post titled, "I got tired of using commercial image hosts. I set up my own. You can use it if you want." The website he linked was called lakecityquietpills.com, but the actual page itself was called That Old Guy's Image Host. On the surface, it was exactly what it sounded like. Basic image hosting site where people could upload pictures. But the name of the website was immediately weird. Lake City is likely a reference to the Lake City ammunition plant in Independence, Missouri, one of the largest small arms ammunition plants in the world. And Quiet Pills sounds very much like a euphemism for bullets. Most people did not think too much of it. Religion of Peace promoted this site, people used it to host images, and for a while, that seemed to be all that it was. But then, on July 17th of 2009, a brand new Reddit account named u/2-6 made a post titled, The End of Religion of Peace. He died today. In the post, 2-6 claimed that Milo had died at his desk while looking at Reddit. According to him, Milo had no real family, almost no friends, and most of his belongings fit in the trunk of a car. 2-6 said he was going to have Milo cremated and scatter his ashes near where he was born. That could have been the end of the story, but this weirdly named website, followed by the owner dying and someone making a Reddit post about them while the website continued to be used, made people think that there might be something more going on. When users checked the source code of LakeCityQuietPills.com, they found hidden messages in the HTML. You had to actually use Inspect Element to view them, and the messages were weird. Some of them sounded like ordinary internal notes between people running the site, but others sounded like job postings. They mentioned things like Spanish speaking, no papers required, no records kept, bondable, EU and Asia, private security, and groups of people needed for specific jobs. There were also names or aliases like Angel, Shade, and 2-6. After Milo's supposed death, hidden messages continued to appear. One message said that Milo's will had cleared probate, and the people who had been sent out between 2005 and 2009 should contact Shade to get paid. Another message announced a birthday party for Dutch Milo on January 19th of 2010. These hidden messages said that they had booked hotel rooms, that people should give their travel name instead of their real name at the desks, that no ID was needed because they were covering the bill, and that phones were not secure. Which is a very strange way to talk about a birthday party. Then, on January 19th of 2010, the same day this party was supposedly happening, Hamas commander Mohammed al-Mabu was assassinated in a hotel room in Dubai. The killing was highly organized, involving fake identities, hotel rooms, surveillance footage, and a large team of operatives. Because of the timing, people started theorizing that Lake City Quiet Pills party was not a party at all, but some kind of coded operation connected to the assassination. Over time, people found even more strange connections. A user named Angel26 had used a Lake City Quiet Pills email address as early as 2001. The phrase, dispensing Lake City Quiet Pills to lousy bastards in need of permanent rest, also appeared connected to that account years before Religion of Peace promoted the image host on Reddit. There were also later theories that Religion of Peace, 2-6, Angel26, and some of the other people involved may not have been separate people at all. Some researchers now believe that many of these accounts were run by one person, possibly someone connected to an older website called Crystal Wind, and later to the image hosting site's forum activity. Eventually, LakeCityQuietPills.com went offline. The hidden messages stopped, the people behind the aliases disappeared, and we're probably never going to know whether Lake City Quiet Pills was part of the assassination, or if it was just an ARG, or if there was some other normal explanation, whatever that would be. Personally, I believe it was probably some kind of ARG. Swamps of Dagobah. On August 4th of 2012, a Reddit user made an Ask Reddit thread titled, Doctors, Nurses, Redditors, what has been your most gory, disgusting, or worst medical experience? Later that same day, user Bonsai Panda replied with the Swamps of Dagobah story. It goes like this. OP was an operating nurse who got called into the hospital at around 2 in the morning for a vague, general surgery case. When they arrived, they found out the patient had a pararectal abscess, which basically means there was a pocket of infected pus near the rectum that needed to be drained. This is obviously already disgusting, but at first, nobody seemed too concerned. According to OP, the surgical team was experienced. OP had worked in healthcare for years, the other nurse had been a trauma specialist for over a decade, the anesthesiologist had been trained at a major trauma center, and the surgeon was ex-army. So this was not some group of brand new doctors and nurses who were easily grossed out. They put the patient, a Native American woman who weighed about 315 pounds, under anesthesia, positioned her for surgery, and OP began cleaning the infected area. At first, it looked like a fairly standard abscess. It was red, inflamed, and leaking a little pus, but nothing that seemed completely insane. Then, the surgeon made the first cut. What nobody realized was that the infection had tunneled deep into the patient's abdomen, creating a huge internal cavity full of pus, dead tissue, and fecal matter that leaked outside of the colon. So, when the surgeon made the incision, all of that pressure released at once. Basically, the patient's body erupted. The infected fluid shot out with so much force that it covered the operating room. The bed was several feet from the nearest wall, but by the end, they were still finding pieces of rotten tissue stuck to that back wall. The floor was covered, the surgeon was getting splashed, the other nurses were dry heaving, and the smell was apparently so bad that one of the nurses vomited into her mask and ran out of the room. At this point, the surgeon was standing in the middle of the room surrounded by pus, dead tissue, fecal matter, and several liters of infected fluid, still calmly trying to clean out the abscess. And that's where the story gets its name. OP says it was like the surgeon was performing surgery in the swamps of Dagobah from Star Wars, except the swamp had come out of this woman's body. Eventually, the surgeon finished cleaning out the wound, packed it with gauze, and they sent the patient to recovery. The room was basically destroyed. OP says the entire department still smelled the next morning. Housekeeping had to suction up the fluid and debris from the floor, and the operating room had to be closed off for 2 more days just to let the smell clear out. Honestly, just based on reading it, this one is not as disturbing to me as the Jolly Rancher or Coconut story, but I think that's literally because I can't fathom how gross it was. Like, it's objectively more disgusting than anything I can even think of, but this story just doesn't affect me. But based on the reaction of the veteran hospital staff, I genuinely believe this might be the most disgusting situation anyone has ever found themselves in. Just pounds and pounds of piss and shit and bodily fluid coming out of someone. It's like, I can't even understand how this much shit is able to exist in one body. But I guess that's how the lady weighed 315 pounds. I do wonder how much weight she lost by the end of the surgery. All right, let's jump into tier 3, the lamp story. Posted by Reddit user imp2tasoon to r/glitch in the matrix. Lamp story is about a person who lived an entire other life while unconscious. This is one of the most depressing and disturbing stories on this entire iceberg. I also read this one for the first time while I was still in high school, and it left me scared of getting knocked out for months. Basically, OP, a small man of about 120 pounds, was assaulted by a 300-pound football player and knocked unconscious. While he was passed out, he met a young lady, fell in love, and pursued her for several months before eventually winning her over. After 2 years, they got married, and they then had a daughter and a son. OP got a dream job and made enough money to support his family so his wife could be a stay-at-home mom. He had the perfect life. Everything was just how he wanted. But then, one day, he was sitting on the couch and noticed that something was wrong with the living room lamp. It was inverted and just wrong, in a way that he couldn't quite explain. Something about it broke him. He stared at the lamp for 3 days and his life started to fall apart. His wife left with the kids to stay at her mother's house, and finally, OP realized what was wrong with the lamp. It wasn't real. None of it was real. The last 10 years of his life was all a dream. He woke up, still on the sidewalk, but genuinely with the feeling that he had just lived 10 years worth of time in what must have only been a few minutes. This day, he still has a perfect memory of his wife, son, and daughter. It's not like a dream that you forget after a few minutes, hours, or days. To this day, he genuinely feels as though he actually experienced all of those things. and his family was taken away from him. For 3 years after the incident, he was depressed. He cried himself to sleep every night, and often he saw his past family briefly in his dreams. The story is just so fucking terrifying because it could really happen to any of us for any reason. It's a perfect story to be considered a glitch in the Matrix too, because I mean, what if the other life was his real life? Who's to say one life is more real than the other? What if he genuinely slipped into an alternate reality, one where he's happier than he'll ever be here, but he'll never be able to go back? It's so sad. I'm gonna try not to think about this anymore. Vagina bacon. This one is fucking disgusting, and it's just another gross out post, which I'm not happy about. If it was up to me, we would have kept all the gross out posts in one tier, but I understand that the iceberg is not about organizing things that way, but rather obscurity. But still, I mean, I don't want to go back to gross out posts, and you probably don't either, but I didn't make the iceberg, and I'm just covering it, so let's go ahead and talk about it. Basically, there's a subreddit called r/popping, which is dedicated to gross stuff coming out of the human body. They like popping pimples, cysts, abscesses, and things of that nature. In 2013, a Reddit user made a post showing a picture of something weird that came out of her body during menstruation. I will not be sharing any pictures because I myself wish I had never seen this, and you shouldn't have to either. But anyway, a user commented saying that it looked like bacon and that OP should fry it up. So OP did. She put it on the stove and fried it. She said it smelled delicious and she really wanted to eat it, but she remembered it came from her body, so she didn't. And that's it for vagina bacon. I'm glad we can move on to something happier. My mom poisoned me. This entry is about a 2013 Reddit post by user Poisoned by Mom to the r/offmychest subreddit. The post starts off with OP describing their abusive household. Ever since OP turned 18, their family has been pressuring them not to ever move out. It started with rational explanations like, you won't be able to afford to live with a minimum wage job. But when OP got a job as a computer programmer, their family started to become openly hostile. When OP talked about moving out, they said that OP hated them and tried to guilt them into staying. Well, when OP finally did move out, their mother packed them several cups of ramen. The cups of ramen seemed as though they might have already been opened, but since OP had just moved out and was broke, they decided to eat them anyway. Well, the first time they ate one, they got sick. Weak, lightheaded, shortness of breath. They recovered over a couple days, but their mom kept calling them and telling them, be sure to eat your ramen. Well, OP got suspicious and ended up purchasing a cyanide testing kit. It went through the process of testing the remaining ramen cups and posted this proof. Sure enough, there was cyanide in the ramen. OP never told their mom that they figured out what was going on, but instead went in no contact with her. In their most recent comment, a year after the initial post, OP confirmed that they had moved out of the state and that their family does not know where they are. This is just so sad and completely devastating. Imagine the person who's supposed to love you more than anyone else doing this to you. It would be so hard to ever trust again after that. Thankfully, OP seems to be a very careful and intelligent person. I hope they'll be okay going forward. Their mother really deserves to go to prison for a long, long time. Brandy Worley. This entry started with a post by user Jason in Hell on r/relationship advice in October of 2016, titled, I'm 30 male, having a hard time coping with my wife, 29 female, having cheated on me with our neighbor, 51 male. In the post, Jason explained that his wife had cheated on him over a year earlier, but he had stayed with her for the sake of their children. The affair started around Father's Day of 2015. Jason noted that his wife had suddenly added a password to her phone, which she claimed was because she was planning a Father's Day surprise for him. A week later, she told him that the surprise was a home office being built by their neighbor, who was a contractor. But even after Father's Day passed, she kept the password on her phone. Jason also noticed that she would smile at her phone and quickly hide it whenever he asked what she was doing. One morning, while she was in the shower, Jason managed to get into her phone and saw a text she had sent to the neighbor saying she was covered in frosting and asking if he wanted to lick it off of her. He tried to dismiss it as her weird sense of humor, which is honestly crazy, but at the same time, I think if you don't want to believe something bad enough, you'll do anything to dismiss it. But anyway, as time went on, the neighbor kept coming over to work on the office, but very little progress was actually being made. I guess he was working on something else and making a lot of progress. Eventually, though, Jason installed anti-theft software on his wife's phone that allowed him to see her texts from his computer. The next day, while he was at work, he watched her message the neighbor trying to meet up. That night, Jason, his wife, their kids, the neighbor's girlfriend, and the neighbor's kid all went out to dinner together. Afterwards, the woman went to see a movie, while Jason and the neighbor went back to Jason's house with the kids. Well, while the neighbor was sitting across from Jason in his living room, Jason was watching the neighbor and his wife text each other sexually in real time. His wife sent the neighbor an explicit photo, they talked about meeting up, and eventually the neighbor texted her something like, "You're my girl now," which she replied that she always had been. When the woman got back from the movie, Jason confronted them. At first, his wife denied everything, but then Jason showed her the messages. She admitted to texting the neighbor, but insisted it was the first time things had actually gone that far. She also denied sending pictures until Jason showed her the picture. Well, she and the neighbor claimed that they had never actually had sex. After the neighbor left, Jason told his wife that he was leaving her, but she responded by threatening him, saying that he would never see the children again if he left. According to Jason, she planned to use the fact that he had attempted suicide in high school to argue that he was unfit to have custody. The next day, Jason's wife told their children that she was leaving because daddy was mad at her. Their son became extremely upset, and Jason felt like his wife was using the kids against him. So, instead of leaving, he begged her to stay. She agreed, but only if Jason apologized to the neighbor, because their sons were friends and they would still have to see each other. Which, come on, he made him apologize to the neighbor that she was cheating on him with. But yeah, Jason apologized to the man his wife had been cheating with. For about a year after that, things were quiet, but Jason never got over it. I mean, how could you? He wrote on Reddit that he still thought about the affair constantly, that his job performance had suffered, and that he felt like a part of his brain would not shut off. Then, around Father's Day again, his wife sent the neighbor more explicit pictures, but then claimed it was an accident and that she meant to send them to Jason. By the time he made the Reddit post, he was basically asking, what am I supposed to do? He felt trapped, exhausted, and afraid that if he asked for a divorce, she would become even more vindictive towards him and the children. The majority of Reddit told him the same thing: get a lawyer and get divorced, which I think was objectively the correct advice to give. A few days later, Jason returned with a short update post titled, "I'm taking your advice." In it, he said his wife had refused counseling, but he was going to get himself and the kids out. He had a meeting with an attorney the next week and thanked Reddit for helping him realize how bad the situation had become. But that's when the story left Reddit. November 17th of 2016, Brandy Worley, OP's wife, called 911 and told the dispatcher that she had stabbed herself and killed her two children, 7-year-old Tyler and 3-year-old Charlie. When asked why, Brandy said that her husband wanted a divorce and wanted to take her kids, and she did not want him to have them. She literally killed her kids just to get back at her husband. According to the prosecutors, the night before the murders, Brandy told Jason that she was going to Walmart to buy pipe cleaners for one of Tyler's school projects. Instead, she bought a knife and hid it in Tyler's bedroom. Later that night, after Jason had put the children to bed and gone to sleep in the basement, Brandy woke Tyler up and told him they were going to have a sleepover in Charlie's room. Once they were in the room, she stabbed Tyler. Charlie woke up and asked what she was doing, and Brandy told her nothing and to go back to sleep. Then Brandy killed Charlie as well. After that, Brandy stabbed herself in the neck, called her mother, and then called 911. Her mother arrived at the house and began screaming, which woke Jason up. When he came upstairs, Brandy reportedly told him, "Now you can't take my children from me." Brandy survived her injuries. She initially pleaded not guilty, but later changed her plea to guilty. In 2018, she was sentenced to 120 years in prison for the murders of her two children, Tyler and Charlie. After the murders, Jason returned to Reddit and posted one final thank you to r/relationship advice. He wrote that no one could have ever foreseen the tragedy that resulted from him filing for divorce, and he thanked the community for the advice and support they had given him. This is one of the craziest stories I've ever heard. This lady was an evil psychopath, and it's so devastating to think that technically OP taking Reddit's advice is what led to her killing the children. Obviously, he did the right thing, though. I mean, like he said, no one could have ever known. Believe that she was evil and that this was going to happen no matter what. Scott Allen Clisholti was a 9-year-old boy from St. Charles, Missouri. On June 8th, 1988, he disappeared near his neighborhood on the last day of the school year. He had been around Ken Drive in West Adams, close to his home on Laverans Drive. Later that afternoon, a heavy thunderstorm hit the area, and because Scott did not come home, his family began looking for him. At first, there was a few possible explanations. One was that Scott had been caught in the storm. The area had wooded trails, creeks, and a network of man-made caves and tunnels that local kids had dug into the hillside over the years. If a 9-year-old boy tried to hide from a sudden storm in one of those tunnels, it was possible he could have been trapped, injured, or buried. Police searched the trails, dredged streams, and later brought in equipment to dig through the tunnels and caves. They did not find Scott. Another theory was abduction. Bloodhounds reportedly tracked Scott's scent away from his home toward Fox Hill Road before losing the trail near a construction area. And over the years, Scott's family and investigators have generally leaned towards the idea that he was taken, not that he simply got lost in the storm. His case remained unsolved. But in January of 2016, a Reddit thread brought Scott's name back up. This thread was on r/AskReddit, and the question was basically asking people who had accidentally killed someone what happened. One anonymous user responded with a story from his childhood. According to that user, when he was a kid in the 1980s, he and two friends had a hideout in a dirt cliff or cove. He described it as a kind of neighborhood base, with a spot at the top that they treated like a guard chair. One day, they went to the hideout and found another neighborhood kid sitting there. The user described this other kid as the weird or creepy kid in the neighborhood. He also said that, looking back as an adult, the child may have had some kind of intellectual disability, although that was only his adult interpretation of a childhood memory. 3 boys yelled at the kid to leave. The kid refused and started throwing dirt clods and sticks down at them. The boys ran around the side of the cliff to get up to him. Redditor said he remembered the child falling. He remembered the sound of the fall. And when the boys got back down to check on him, the child was lying in a strange position and had blood coming out of his mouth. 3 boys panicked and ran home. According to this Redditor, they never told anyone. They did not go back to the hideout for more than a month, and they never spoke about it again. He said he didn't know for sure whether the child died, but he remembered his mother later mentioning that the boy had gone missing. After reading the post, one Redditor got curious and began going through the commenter's history and tried to figure out where he grew up, how old he was, and what missing child cases might line up with the story. The sleuth claimed that the poster had mentioned a TV show that only aired in the St. Louis area during the late 1980s and early 1990s. They also believed the poster's age would have made him around 10 or 12 years old in 1988. From there, the sleuth landed on Scott Clisholti, though whether this comment was referring to him, we'll probably never know. Scott Clisholti was never found. The man who ate his own foot. This started as a 2018 Ask Me Anything thread by u/incredibly shiny shart. He wrote, "About 2 years ago, I was hit on my motorcycle. They salvaged my foot, but I would never be able to walk on it. I elected to have it amputated. I asked the doctors if I could keep it. I signed some papers, I got it back, and with the help of some friends, cooked a portion of the tibialis anterior. OP then provided proof of his amputated foot, as well as the tacos that him and about 10 of his friends were eating." This is such an interesting moral question, right? Is it wrong for OP to eat his own foot? Is it wrong for his friends to eat it with him? Since he already lost the foot, no one got hurt by the decision. All of his friends knew what they were eating, so it's not like he lied to them. If you're curious, OP said that his foot tasted like buffalo, and he rated the meal a 6.5 out of 10. Homicidal Memer. This entry started in April of 2013 when Reddit user Narado made a post to r/advice animals titled, "Finally have the guts to say it." Context, r/advice animals was one of the biggest meme subreddits on Reddit at the time. In this case, Narado posted this confession bear meme. Which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. A picture of a bear with some kind of confession. Usually when people use this meme, it's supposed to be embarrassing, weird, or funny. Like, I pretend I don't hear people so they'll stop talking to me. Or, I ate my roommate's food and blamed someone else. But Narado's confession was a little different. Here it is on screen now. My sister had an abusive meth addict boyfriend. I killed him with his own drugs while he was unconscious, and they ruled it as an overdose. The post immediately blew up, because no one could tell if it was a joke or an actual murder confession. Some people treated it like classic Reddit nonsense and started making jokes about Breaking Bad and Dexter, but others took it seriously. They started digging through Narado's Reddit history to figure out who he was, where he lived, and whether there were any overdose deaths near him that matched the story. And because Narado posted it from his main account instead of a throwaway, people were apparently able to find personal information connected to him. According to reports at the time, Redditors found things like his name, social media accounts, location, and job history. Eventually, the story left Reddit. Multiple articles were written about it, and ABC News reported that the San Diego Police Department's cold case unit had received a tip and was looking into whether or not the confession was real. Narado then tried to walk it back. In a later deleted comment, he said that there was some truth behind the post, but refused to say which parts were true and which parts were not. He also said he posted it just to see what would happen, then complained about people taking him too seriously. After that, Narado deleted his account, and the story basically went cold. There does not seem to be any solid evidence that he was arrested, charged, or that the murder was even proven to be real, so it's not clear whether the confession was real or fake, and we'll probably never know. Red as Blue 101. This entry started in May of 2017, when a Reddit user named u/redasblue101 made a post to r/Canada News titled, "Wanted for Kitchener Murder, My Side." Kitchener is a city in Ontario, Canada, and at the time, police were looking for a 24-year-old man named Agar Hassan in connection with the murder of his ex-girlfriend, 22-year-old Melinda Vasilje. The post was written as if it was Hassan himself explaining what happened. At the beginning, he says he understands why people think he is trying to run away, but he claimed that he was not trying to escape. He said he just needed space to process what was happening before turning himself in. Then, he starts explaining his relationship with Melinda. According to him, they had been together for a little over a year. He says they were extremely close, talked about marriage and kids, they traveled together, met each other's families, and he said that she was more than just a girlfriend. He describes her as his best friend and says he would never intentionally hurt her, but the relationship had gotten worse near the end. He says he started asking Melinda for more space so he could focus on work. Around this time, Melinda moved in with her friend, Anna, and eventually, after an argument over text, the two of them broke up. After the breakup, Hassan says he drove to Melinda's apartment to try and talk things out, but when he arrived, he was confronted by Anna's brother and boyfriend. There was a physical altercation, the police got involved, and after that, he and Melinda did not talk for a few weeks. What the post downplays is that this earlier incident was very serious. In reality, Hassan had broken into Melinda's home and assaulted 2 people. After that, he was under court conditions that banned him from contacting Melinda or entering Waterloo region, where Kitchener is located. But according to the Reddit post, he and Melinda eventually started texting again. They agreed to meet up and talk in person, and on the night of April 27th, he drove to her apartment. The post included screenshots of what were supposedly their final text messages. In them, Melinda says she feels sick and does not think she can drive to him. He tells her not to drive and says he will come to her instead. She seems hesitant at first, but eventually tells him to wait until Anna is gone then buzzes him into the building. According to Hassan's version of events, when he arrived, he and Melinda cuddled, kissed, and talked things over. They decided to give the relationship another chance, but they were going to keep it quiet because of everything that happened with the police. Then, as he was getting ready to leave, Melinda allegedly asked him if he had been with any other women during the breakup. He says he told her the truth. Yes. And she started crying, slapping, and hitting him. He says he pushed her away and she fell against the kitchen sink. He apologized and tried to hug her, but according to him, she grabbed a knife and came at him. From there, he claims everything happened in a panic. He says he tried to grab the knife, but his hands freaked out, grabbed another knife, and hit her with it a few times. He says he did not realize she was dead when he left, thought she had only passed out. Now that's just ridiculous. Even if he didn't think she was dead, if you stab someone with a knife and they pass out, whether or not they're dead one moment doesn't mean they can't be dying. He knows what he did. He killed her. Also, I just have a hard time believing his version of events, that she attacked him first, considering he has a history of breaking into her apartment and being abusive. But anyway, at the end of the post, Hassan says he's reading the news and seeing the murder described as targeted. He argues that if he had planned to kill Melinda, he would not have brought her roses, and that he would have taken money and clean clothes before leaving. He says he is in the United States with $200 and no plan. Whether he had originally planned to kill her or not doesn't really matter, considering he killed her regardless. At the bottom of the post, he includes a picture of him and Melinda together, and a picture of their last conversation together. His last sentence in the post was, "Some people think I was a stranger that just killed her," which is just crazy. It's like he's saying that it's okay he killed her because he knew her super well. At first, people didn't know if the post was real or fake. Some users thought it was a troll, others started comparing the details in the post to news articles about the Kitchener murder, and it quickly became clear that it probably was connected to a real case. Redditors reported the post to the police, and Waterloo Regional Police later confirmed they were aware of it and evaluating it as potential evidence. But the more information that came out, the worse Hassan's story looked. Melinda Vasilje was found dead in her apartment in the early hours of April 28th of 2017. Police said she had been killed in what they believed was a targeted attack. Hassan crossed into the United States shortly after the murder, and police said he was later seen in Pennsylvania taking a license plate from another vehicle and putting it on his own. So despite saying on Reddit that he was not trying to escape, he was obviously on the run. For more than 2 months, police searched for him. He was believed to be in the United States, and authorities worked with law enforcement to find him. Eventually, on July 11th of 2017, Hassan was arrested in San Antonio, Texas, during an unrelated counterfeit currency investigation. Years later, the case finally went to trial. Hassan maintained that he had acted in self-defense, but the evidence made that extremely hard to believe. Melinda had not been stabbed a few times, like the Reddit post said. She had been stabbed 47 times. 27 of those wounds were to her neck, and 6 were to her chest. In 2023, Ajar Hassan was found guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, with parole eligibility after 16 years. Because he has already been in custody since 2017, the earliest he can be released is 2033, which, if you ask me, is way too soon. The Butcher. The Butcher is a lost media mystery that started in September of 2019 when Reddit user DeadUser00 made a post to r/tipofmytongue titled Short Film 2010s, Nickelodeon's creepy stop-motion film related to a butcher. In the post, OP says that when they were living in South America in the early to mid-2000s, Nickelodeon would air strange short films between regular shows. Most of these shorts were harmless, but one in particular stuck with them because of how dark it was. According to OP, the short was black and white, had no dialogue, and featured stop-motion puppets made out of real animal bones. They believed the title was something close to The Butcher. From what they could remember, the short showed a butcher working in a dark room. There were bones in jars, a butcher's knife, and small skeleton animals that eventually rebelled against him. Opie thought that the bone animals may have fused together into one bigger creature and attacked the butcher. OP was very specific that this was not a normal cartoon. It was not Mr. Meaty, Courage the Cowardly Dog, or some creepy animated episode. It was a short film. The characters looked like actual animal skeletons, and OP believes some of them were made from things like bird, rabbit, or dog bones. Because of how bizarre the description was, people started throwing out guesses. One of the most convincing early guesses was a short called Dakuro, which is also a creepy stop-motion film involving bones. But Op said that couldn't be right because Dakuro came out in 2011, and OP remembered seeing the short before leaving South America in 2009. So for a while, the butcher remained unsolved. But then in 2020, OP made another post, this time titled Tip of My Tongue, the Nickelodeon movie that used real bones. In this post, they made a checklist of everything they remembered. Small animals made out of real bones, a butcher played by a real person, the butcher getting attacked by his creations, black and white visuals, music with no dialogue, bones inside glass containers, and stop motion. And this time, they said they were about 90% sure they had found it. The short was called Butcher's Hook, directed by Simon Pummel. Butcher's Hook is a 1996 short film that you can actually watch here on YouTube. I'll put the link in the description of this video if you're interested. It matches a lot of what OP described. It has a butcher or taxidermist-like figure, unsettling stop motion, dead animals, and bones. The only major problem is that OP could not confirm whether Butcher's Hook ever actually aired on Nickelodeon in South America. I think this is probably a case where OP thinks they remember seeing the film on Nickelodeon, but they probably saw it elsewhere and the memory just kind of blended together with other memories of watching Nickelodeon at night. Because I just don't think this would be something that Nickelodeon would play. The Whistler. The Whistler is a 2015 Ask Reddit thread titled, What is the creepiest thing that has ever actually happened to you? Reddit user BingBong1234 replied with the story of The Whistler. It goes like this. When OP was around 8, he was walking his dog with his mom around 11 p.m. near a swamp area in Michigan. They heard a strange 2-note whistle from the swamp, high then low, that sounded almost like a bird, but inconsistent enough to feel like it was probably human. His mom got visibly terrified, grabbed his hand, and rushed him inside. 2 years later, he was walking by himself and heard the same whistle again. He immediately got scared and ran back home and inside. For a long time after that, OP didn't hear the whistle. But one day, years and years later, when OP was 24 and living in South Dakota, he was watching fireworks by the Missouri River with his girlfriend Sarah. A canoe came by in the dark, about 20 meters offshore. The person in the canoe allegedly turned toward him and whistled the exact same whistle from his childhood. OP shouted, "Who are you?" But the figure just whistled again, turned the canoe around, and paddled away. What makes this story so interesting to some people is that there's video evidence of the whistling while he was at the Missouri River. A lot of people found the evidence super creepy and very compelling. I'll put the link to the video in the description, but honestly, this isn't really scary or disturbing to me, like, at all. The video just looks like some dude in a canoe whistling to himself, and then OP losing his shit over it. That concludes Tier 3. Moving on to Tier 4, we're going to start with an entry called Mysterious Stores. 12 Mysterious Stores refers to a Reddit thread from r/TooAfraidToAsk, posted by user IcemanThrowaway123 in July of 2019. The post is pretty short, so I'll go ahead and read it to you in its entirety. I live just outside a big city in what resembles a suburban main street. Like many suburban main streets, retail business has been rough, and they've all closed down. After a month of nothingness, suddenly 12, yes, a dozen, identical convenience stores pop up. They look the same, they aim for the same floor plan, they sell the same products at the same prices. Their names are all tiny variations of each other, like Town Name Mart, or Market of Town Name, and all clearly bought their signs from the same place as the fonts, colors, size, and shapes are identical. These stores see no business that I've ever witnessed, yet have large staff numbers and are surviving way longer than the former stores that closed on the street. When I enter one, they all stare at me while I shop. I don't usually get nervous, but it feels like they're staring threateningly rather than intently. They only accept cash unless you pay some $50. Most of their products are Walmart brand great value products being resold for higher prices. Most of the products are expired food products. I bought bread from one without checking because I was in a rush, and it turned out it was 2 months expired. Upon returning to show them, I found that the entire shelf was expired foods. What was even grosser was the dairy cooler, which had ancient milk products. In the comments of the thread, people hypothesized the stores were a front for something illegal. Money laundering, drugs, human trafficking. If this is a real story, this is almost definitely the answer. It makes sense, because if you're trying to fill a store with product but don't actually care about profiting from the store, housing expired items is probably the cheapest way to do so. The story never really went anywhere from there, though. P said they were going to provide proof, they never did, and they said they were going to do some experiments and research, but never provided any more information. I was in a cult. I was in a cult started in January of 2017 when a Reddit user, u/throwaway181718, made a post to r/confession titled, I was in a cult. In the post, OP explains that a few years earlier, when he was in college, he was dealing with severe depression. He was taking medication, going to therapy, and attending group therapy. One day, during one of these group therapy sessions, the therapist introduced the group to a man named Bob. Bob told the teenagers about a free 5-week group therapy holiday over the summer. Basically, they would go away to a camp, do things like rafting and rock climbing, make friends, and continue therapy in a more adventurous setting. OP was interested, so after the session, he asked Bob for more information. Bob didn't have a card, so instead he asked OP for his contact details. OP gave him his phone number, his email address, and his home address. Later that same night, while OP was telling his parents about the camp, there was a knock at their front door. It was Bob. Bob came inside, talked to OP's parents, and explained that the camp would be good for his mental health, that it would be completely free, and that I would give him new experiences. Eventually, OP's parents agreed. They signed some paperwork, and OP went to the camp. This is just super creepy, because who comes to someone's house unannounced to convince their parents to let them go to some camp? Feels like he was very adamant about making sure OP came with him. First, though, the camp seemed normal enough. A bus took them to a huge walled-off campsite, and Bob said they would be doing adventure courses and team-building activities. But when they got there, things quickly started to feel wrong. Everyone had to go through a physical checkup. OP says the exam was uncomfortably thorough. Shortly after, they realized that their suitcases were missing. When asked about it, Bob said they were not allowed to keep their luggage or their phones, and that this was all in the contract they had signed. And this is the point where, if I hadn't left already, I would have been out of there. Yeah, it was in the contract, but this guy knew they weren't going to read it. If he really wanted them to know, he would have told them beforehand. Why would he let them pack suitcases just to not allow them to keep anything? He is definitely up to something rotten. But anyway, the campers were instead given these ugly tracksuits that made them look like prisoners. From there, the camp became even stranger. The boys and girls were not allowed to talk to each other. They had to swim in their tracksuits. Every meal began with prayer, even though OP had not been told that this was a religious group. The leaders kept using phrases like, "The gods will show us the way to the end," and they told the campers that, if they wanted, they could stay longer than 5 weeks, and even invite their families to live there. Eventually, OP asked if he could call home. Bob told him that his family already knew he had arrived safely, and that he was happy, so there was no need. Dude, this is the point where you do anything you can to get out. This is like the point in the movie where the main character knows the person they're staying with isn't going to let them leave, but they know that they can't let them know that they know. You just need to find a way out without making them suspicious. That night, during a campfire and group therapy session, OP asked to use the bathroom and snuck into the main building. He found an empty office, called his mom, and told her what was happening. She said they were coming to get him immediately. That was such a smart choice. It's the type of thing I always want people to do in those horror movies. Like, you can't get mad and tell them you're trying to leave if you're suspicious that they won't let you. And I think OP made the right call. In the back room, OP found the camper's suitcases and a plastic box full of phones. He found his phone, put it in his pocket, and started looking for his suitcase. That was when another group leader, who OP called Todd, caught him. Todd dragged him out, yelled at him for disobeying the rules, and accused him of being proud for trying to get his clothes back. OP was taken back to the group, everyone was punished, and they were all sent to bed without dinner. But OP still had his phone. So from bed, he secretly texted his dad. Eventually, his dad texted that they were outside. OP ran out of the building, past the group leaders, down the dirt road, and into his parents' car. The leaders chased after him, told his parents that he was not allowed to leave because of the contract, and allegedly tried to open the car doors to get him out. But his parents managed to drive away. The next morning, Todd and other group leaders allegedly showed up at OP's house and tried to make him come back. His dad called the police, and they were escorted away. Later, when OP finally tried to go back to college, he claimed that around 10 group members surrounded him on the street, calling after him. Neighbors came outside, a fight broke out, and OP ran home. According to OP, group leaders were arrested, but more members kept showing up. Eventually, his family moved, he stopped attending that college, and they unofficially started using a new surname so that the group couldn't find them. At the very end of the post, OP claimed that the college stopped funding the group, police started an investigation, and Todd killed himself while out on bail. About 24 hours after the initial post, OP made an update. He said he did not want to expose the group because it could interfere with the police investigation. He also said he was scared to even Google the group's name because he thought they might track him down. Then, shortly after that, OP made a post to r/help asking how to delete a message he had posted. And then came the next update. OP returned to the original thread and wrote that the story was not true. He said he had actually been a part of a therapy group for teenagers with mental health problems, that it was not a cult, that he had decided to rejoin the group, and that he would answer no further questions. That update is what made the story famous. His wording sounded so stiff and weird. Or Steven. Some people thought maybe the cult had found him and hacked into his Reddit account. Others thought he'd been brainwashed. For years, the story stayed in this weird place. No one knew what was true and what wasn't. But in 2023, OP returned with one final post titled Closed. In the post, he confirmed that this story was entirely fiction, completely fake. According to him, the story was fake, but it did have a real-life inspiration. Back in 2011, while studying in the UK and dealing with mental health problems, he was invited to a camp for students. The group did offer activities like rock climbing and archery, and the man running it really did show up to his house unexpectedly with a contract. His parents thought the whole thing sounded suspicious, and they refused to let him go. He never went to the camp, he was never trapped there, no one chased him, his family never changed identities. All of it was just a little fiction project. Now, I read this in chronological order, just like the way I explained it to you guys, and I was very surprised when OP confirmed that the story was fake, but I'm not surprised that the story was fake. I mean, a huge cult funded by a college, his parents letting him go after weird guys show up at their house with a contract. Also, some of the details were just super vague. It did kind of feel like someone making up a story as they went along. To me, this story is just a reminder that a lot of the stories you read on Reddit are fake. It's just rare for the OP to come out and actually admit it, which I applaud him for. Unlikely Heroin Addict refers to the Reddit saga of u/SpontaneousH, a user who basically documented his addiction in real time. This started on September 14th of 2009, when Spontaneous H made a post to r/IMA titled, "I did heroin yesterday. I am not a drug user and have never done anything besides pot back when I was a teen. Ask me anything." In the post, he described himself as a fairly normal guy. He was 24, had a master's degree, and had a well-paying full-time job. He was not a drug user, outside of drinking occasionally and smoking weed a few times when he was younger. Then, one day, as he was walking through Washington Square Park and stopped near some benches to check messages on his phone, a dealer asked him if he needed anything, and Spontaneous H originally thought he might just buy some weed. But the dealer did not have the amount of weed that he wanted. Instead, he offered him coke or heroin. For whatever reason, Spontaneous H decided, why not? I'll go ahead and try some heroin. He said part of the reason was that his life had felt boring. He felt like he had not really taken any risks or done anything crazy. He'd heard about heroin. He knew it was supposed to be extremely addictive, and he'd seen it in movies and in shows like The Wire. So, almost out of nowhere, he decided to buy it. It would be an adventure. After using it, he described the experience in glowing terms. He said it was the most intense relaxation and pleasure he had ever felt. He said he finally understood why people got addicted to drugs, but insisted that he understood the risks and he wouldn't do it again for a long time. People in the comments, of course, started warning him. They told him he was playing with fire. They told him that the confidence he had was exactly the kind of confidence addicts have before their lives fall apart. But Spontaneous H pushed back. He got annoyed at people lecturing him, said they had misconceptions about the drug, and argued that he knew the risks. In one edit, he even said he did not regret trying it at all. Then, somehow, he started talking about trying cocaine next, because he wanted to compare the two, for science. So already, you can kind of see the rationalization happening in real time. 13 days later, he posted again. Title of the next AMA was, 2 weeks ago I tried heroin, once for fun, and made an AMA. I've been using since and shot up for the first time today. Ask me anything. 13 days, dude. That's what makes this story so disturbing. In less than 2 weeks, he went from, I'm not a drug user, to using drugs repeatedly and injecting meth for the first time. Really scary because I've always been so confident that I could try anything once and not get addicted. I drink occasionally, but I've never had a drinking problem. I've smoked weed before and never had a weed problem. I imagine he's similar to the kind of person I am. But I think something like heroin is a completely different ballpark. Crazy how fast it can ruin your life. In this next update, he was already completely different. He was talking about withdrawal, throwing up, sweating, craving, and wanting to use again even though he knew he shouldn't. He said his girlfriend had found out, his relationship was falling apart, and he just couldn't stop crying. A month after the first post, Spontaneous H made another AMA, saying he had gotten addicted, started injecting, and started Suboxone treatment. A year later, in October of 2010, he returned to Reddit from a psychiatric hospital. The title of the post was, I'm a patient in a psychiatric hospital. I was also technically dead last week. Ask me anything. In the post, he said he could not believe it had been over a year since he first discovered heroin. Then, 2 days later, he made an AMA with an even more direct title. I am a heroin/opioid/multi-substance addict with bipolar disorder headed to rehab tomorrow because I didn't listen to Reddit. I OD'd 1 week ago and am in a psych hospital. Ask me anything. In that post, he explained that he had overdosed on fentanyl and had to be revived with Narcan. According to him, if he had been found about 10 minutes later, he would have died. He also admitted that Reddit had warned him when he first made that AMA, and that he did not listen. For years, the Spontaneous H story was shared on Reddit and YouTube as a cautionary tale. It became one of those classic Reddit stories that people bring up whenever someone online says they can try something dangerous just once. But thankfully, this one actually has a happy ending. In January of 2017, almost 8 years after the original post, Spontaneous H returned with an update on r/opiates recovery. He said he was almost 6 years clean from all drugs and alcohol, and that life was good. He also said it was difficult to go back and read his old posts. Looking back, he admitted that things were probably not as normal before heroin as he let on. There were already warning signs with alcohol, weed, and other substances, but he could not admit that to himself at the time. Though it's still somewhat disturbing, this is an awesome story overall. We hear about drug addicts and people becoming addicted to things all the time. We rarely get to see it played out in such a detailed and honest manner. It goes to show two things. No matter how confident you are not immune to addiction. And two, it's never late for recovery. We should all use this as a lesson. Late night recordings. Late night recordings refers to a Reddit post made by u/RedOnceBlue80 on r/ghosts titled Experience Using Sleep as Android app. In the post, Opie explains that she uses an app called Sleep as Android to improve her sleep. One of the features on the app is that it records nighttime noises. snoring, sleep talking, coughing, covers moving, and basically anything loud enough to trigger the recording while you're sleeping. She had been using the app since October 1st of 2013, and for months, she'd never caught anything weird. Usually it was just normal sleep sounds, coughing, moving around, or random bed noises. But on December 30th, OP was sleeping in her bed with her 3-year-old son when at 2:04 in the morning, the app recorded something different. Here's the cleaned up version of what the app recorded.
What are you doing? Okay.
According to OP, it was only her and her son in the house. But you can clearly hear in the video a female voice saying, "What are you doing?" Then a deeper, muffled, but clearly male voice saying, "Nothing." Near the very end of the recording, you can hear what sounds like the same deeper voice say one more unclear phrase. OP thinks that it sounded like her name, Jenny. Other people thought it sounded like, "I'm Danny," or "I'm dead," or "That's them." At first, OP tried to come up with the most normal explanation. Maybe she was sleep talking. Maybe she had answered herself in a weird voice while half asleep. Maybe her son had said something. Maybe the app just made the recording sound worse than it really was. But even she said the voice did not sound like something she could make, and it definitely did not sound like a preschool-aged child. There were also these clicking sounds, and she had no idea what they were. She kept a fan running at night for white noise. She said the clicks sounded like they were coming from right beside her phone, which was on the bedside table next to her. Reddit, of course, immediately started trying to figure it out. Some people thought it was just sleep talking. Some thought it was her son. Some thought it was the fan or a bottle or her dog or something else in the room making a weird sound. Some jumped to the paranormal, since this was posted on r/ghosts after all. Others thought it might have been a home invader. One user made a super long comment arguing that the clicking sound sounded like someone rummaging through a bag or closing clasps. Their theory was that OP half woke up, asked, "What are you doing?" and whoever was in the room calmly answered, "Nothing," because they realized she was not fully awake. What makes the home invasion theory even creepier is that the clicking seems to pause right after OP asks the question. Then, after the voice says nothing, the clicking eventually continues. So it almost sounds like someone or something stopped moving when they realized she had spoken, waited to see if she was actually awake, and then kept going. But there are a few problems with that theory too. He said nothing was missing from the house. She also said her valuables, like her laptop and iPad, were downstairs in plain sight. If someone had broken in to steal something, why would they go into the bedroom where she was sleeping? Why not take the easy stuff downstairs and then just leave? She also had a dog, which makes the intruder theory harder to explain. You would think a dog would react a little bit or make some kind of noise if a stranger was moving around inside the house. I know my dogs would. And then there's the clicking itself. One possible explanation is actually built into the Sleep as Android app. The app has an anti-snoring feature where, if it detects snoring, it can play a sound or vibrate to interrupt the snoring. According to Sleep as Android's own documentation, one of the anti-snoring sounds is tongue clicking. So it's possible that the clicking sounds were not paranormal and not an intruder, but the app itself trying to stop OP from snoring. That would explain the clicking, but it doesn't explain the voice. Months later, a Reddit user and sound expert named Findabaron made a separate post analyzing the audio. OP had sent him several recordings of her voice and her son's voice, speaking as high and low as they could. He compared them to the voice in the sleep recording. His argument was that the second voice was significantly lower than OP's voice. He said OP's normal voice was around 200 hertz, and the lowest she could make her voice go was around 160 to 170 hertz. But the second voice, according to his analysis, had a much lower bass frequency, possibly around 90 hertz. Basically, his conclusion was that the second voice was not OP talking to herself, and it was not her son. After the original post blew up, OP continued to update people. She said she beefed up her home security, changed the locks, and never caught another voice recording. But she did hear the clicking again 1 or 2 more times. One time it woke her up, and she tried to track back where it was coming from. She said it seemed like it was coming from the area of her fan, about 12 feet away from her bed, but as she got closer, the sound faded and stopped. She also said the whole thing messed with her for a while. At one point, she even walked through the house and asked whatever it was to leave because she and her son were scared. Eventually, OP said that she still used the app, but only for sleep monitoring. She stopped listening to the recordings. Then, in 2015, she made one final update saying she no longer lived in the house where it happened, so there would be no more updates. So this entry remains unsolved to this day. Datura. Datura refers to the Reddit story of user Flip'n'Flop, a user who posted an r/drugs in April of 2017, asking for advice about trying Datura, a deliriant drug that is known to cause hallucinations and blackouts. The post was titled, "Finally got my hands on some Datura. How much should I take?" In the post, OP explained that they had gotten hold of Datura seed, and that they were going to have the house themselves the next day. They said they were excited to try the effects of the plant, and asked Reddit how much they should take for a first-time experience. The response on r/drugs was almost completely unanimous. Do not do this, which is a pretty bad sign, because the subreddit is literally for people who enjoy taking drugs recreationally. If serious drug users are telling you not to touch something, you should probably take their advice. The reason people were so against it is because Datura is not a normal psychedelic. It's a deliriant. It's known to cause confusion so intense that users don't know they're hallucinating. People report talking to people who are not there, smoking imaginary cigarettes, reading books that don't exist, forgetting they took anything at all, and walking around in a confused state. On top of that, Datura is also poisonous, and the potency can vary greatly from plant to plant. So even if someone online says one amount affected them this way, doesn't mean the same thing will happen to someone else. You basically have no idea what's going to happen once you take this drug. Commenters warned OP over and over. Some people shared their own bad experiences. One user said they used Datura in high school and were still mentally affected by it afterward. Others said the best possible dose was 0. People were basically begging OP not to go through with it. But OP had already made up their mind. They replied to some of the warnings and said they had been reading about the effects for a few days. They knew it was not supposed to be trippy like other hallucinogens, but they were still fascinated by the stories of people talking to imaginary people or reading books that don't exist. Then, OP updated the thread saying they had started taking it. After that, there was silence for hours. Then at 5:55 in the morning on April 18th, OP returned with the following comment. Google.com. How normal again, stop now. People started replying with even more concern. Some asked OP to let them know they were okay. Others told them to get help if things got worse. Because this was Datura, people could not even confidently reassure them that everything would be fine. About 12 hours later, he appeared again, but in r/gaming under a post of this gif of 2 mammoths fighting from Totally Accurate Battle Simulator. Flip'n'Flop commented, "Please, these big dogs are fighting, not okay," which I guess means something like, "Please, these big dogs are fighting, not okay." And after that comment, Flip'n'Flop never posted again. To this day, no one has any idea what happened to them. Now, this story is pretty realistic, but it was also made under a throwaway account, which makes it difficult to determine whether the events actually happened. But since there was no proof in either direction, for a long time the story was just kind of stuck there. Years later, there was a possible update. In a YouTube comment, someone explained that Flip'n'Flop was actually their old friend, a man named Scott Hederick. According to this commenter, Scott had survived the Datura experience, but was too embarrassed to go back and reply to Reddit. They said he was fascinated by plants, especially psychoactive ones, and that he was going for a master's degree in clinical psychology. The same commenter also claimed that Scott later died in September of 2018. There really was a man named Scott Hederick who died in 2018, and there are public obituary records for him. But the connection between Scott and Flip'n'Flop has not been publicly verified. It's still just a claim from a random YouTube comment that anyone could have made. So I wouldn't necessarily call this mystery solved. Carl H. Carl H refers to Carl Philip Harold, a Reddit user who, for many years, was mostly known as a helpful programming teacher. His subreddit was called r/Carl H Programming, and it was an archive of free programming classes taught by Carl. The idea was simple. He would teach people how to code, starting with beginner lessons and moving into more advanced topics. Carl had a YouTube channel, a website, a subreddit, and a reputation as someone who explained programming in a way that regular people could understand. He advertised free programming courses, answered questions, and built a real audience around teaching. People thanked him for helping them learn computer science. Others said his videos made programming feel less intimidating. He was even named Redditor of the Day on July 26 of 2012. But in late 2013, Carl suddenly went quiet. First, people didn't know what happened. His subreddit was still up, his tutorials were still online, his old posts were still there, but Carl himself seemed to just vanish from the community. Then the news came out. In November of 2013, Carl Philip Harold was arrested in Huntsville, Alabama, after an FBI child exploitation investigation. Local news reported that he was facing multiple charges involving child sexual abuse material, including production and distribution. Even worse, Carl and Charles repeatedly recorded themselves sexually assaulting the child, and they distributed the materials online. This wasn't just a random criminal who happened to have a Reddit account. This was someone people knew as a teacher. Literally a Reddit celebrity, a Redditor of the Day award recipient who turned out to be an evil pedophile. It's sad how often the people who we think are the bright spots in our community end up being the ones who are committing the most vile actions. Today, r/Carl H programming is a digital graveyard. The tutorials are still there, the comments are still there. It's crazy to look back at some of the posts from 17 years ago where people are talking about Carl like he's the best guy they know and donating money to help him continue making videos. After his arrest, Carl denied the allegations. But in November of 2014, he hung himself in jail. After his arrest, Carl denied the allegations. But in November of 2014, he hung himself in his jail cell. He never faced punishment for his crimes. His partner, Charles Dunavant, did go through the legal system. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 36 years in prison. So it's pretty clear that Carl H. was guilty. It just goes to show that you never really know someone you only see online. You only see what they want you to see. 9M, 9H, 9E9, also known as Mother Horse Eyes or the Interface series, this refers to one of the strangest fiction projects to ever come out of Reddit. In April of 2016, a Reddit account named 9Mother, 9Horse, 9Eyes, 9 started leaving long, bizarre comments in random threads across the site. And I mean like super, super random. People would be reading a completely normal Reddit thread about politics or a cute dog picture, and then suddenly in the comments there would be this huge wall of text about MK Ultra, LSD, and secret government programs. Nazis, Vietnam, whales, alternate histories, flesh portals, and something called Mother. For example, let's look at this thread on r/funny. It's just a funny Harry Potter gif. But if you go into the comments, there's this long comment from Mother Horse Eyes, starting with, "Mother has put a nail in my brain. The nail stays still. Everything else moves." When people started to click onto the account and read through the comment history, they realized these comments were not disconnected posts. Each one was a piece of a larger story. A story became known as the Interface series. The basic idea is that throughout human history, people have been encountering or creating things called flesh interfaces. These are grotesque, biological, portal-like structures made of living tissue that seem to connect our world to something else. The story ties these interfaces into real events and real historical horrors. It uses MK Ultra, the CIA's experiments with LSD, World War II, the Vietnam War, concentration camps, Cold War black sites, and far future technology, then twists all of it into this one massive body horror mythology like nothing you've ever heard of before. In this universe, LSD is not just a drug. It's connected to consciousness, reality, and the creation of these interfaces. Under certain conditions, human minds, human bodies, and human suffering become a part of a larger system. And in control of that system, or somewhere behind it, it's not entirely clear exactly how it works, there is this thing called Mother. Now, over time, a subreddit formed around the story called r/9m9h9e9. People started collecting the comments, arranging them into a readable order, building timelines, making glossaries, archiving deleted material, creating fan art, discussing theories, and trying to figure out what the story was actually saying. The subreddit basically became a research hub for this fictional universe. It got so big that The Verge covered it in April of 2016, only days after the account started posting, describing it as a horrifying sci-fi world being built inside Reddit communities. The Guardian covered it in May of that year, focusing on how the story seemed to appear in plain sight. Vice/Motherboard covered it, especially after people started wondering whether the whole thing might somehow be connected to Stranger Things because of the MK Ultra talk and the interdimensional weirdness. People really just want to know who was writing it. Was it one anonymous author? Was it viral marketing, a famous writer testing something? Was it leading to a book, a game, or some larger project? And to this day, we don't know. But if you want to learn more about the Interface series, I highly recommend checking out Creepcast's coverage of it, and then watching Windigoon's video where he analyzes the whole story as a whole. He explains it in a much more coherent way than I could ever dream of. Decomposing Fetus Story. The Decomposing Fetus Story refers to an old Reddit medical horror story posted in an Ask Reddit thread where people shared moments when they realized something had gone horribly wrong. A user named FatMama923 replied with a story of why she dropped out of nursing school. One day, while she was doing some basic hospital work for class credit, a severely overweight patient came into the hospital complaining of intense abdominal and vaginal pain, along with a high fever. The doctor examined her and felt a mass in her lower abdomen. Because of the patient's size, the staff had trouble doing the normal imaging they would usually do, so they had to work around it in the emergency room. Eventually, as the staff tried to examine her more closely, they noticed a terrible smell and a dark fluid coming from the area they were trying to inspect. At first, the nursing students did not know what was happening. The person telling the story says she was not close enough to see everything clearly, and mostly remembers the smell, the panic in the room, and being sent to go get the doctor. Then, the cause was discovered. The patient had been pregnant, but had miscarried without realizing it. Because of her size and other circumstances, she allegedly never knew she was pregnant and never realized what happened. By the time she came to the hospital, the fetal remains and placenta had been retained long enough to cause a severe infection. She had to be taken into emergency surgery, treated with IV antibiotics, and she stayed in the hospital for a long time afterward. But just the idea of this being a possibility was enough to make Fat Mama 923 quit nursing school. And honestly, I can't blame her. I think I would have done the exact same thing. Quantum immortality. Quantum immortality refers to the Reddit account u/AFH43, a user who became fixated on the idea of quantum immortality and started posting about it across multiple science and philosophy subreddits. Now, quantum immortality is basically a thought experiment. The simplified version is, if there are branching realities, and in one branch you die, but in another branch you survive, then from your own point of view, maybe you would only ever experience the branch where you continue living. From the outside, you would still die like everyone else. From your own perspective, the fear is that you would never actually experience an endpoint. Your consciousness would just keep continuing in whatever version of reality allowed you to survive. Now, this could sound like a good thing at first, but if you think about surviving forever, I don't think anybody really wants that. Again, this is a thought experiment. It's not something that scientists have proven or even find probable. It's not something you should use to guide your life. And in AFH43's Reddit threads, a lot of people tried to explain this to him, but for whatever reason, the idea just latched onto him. In February of 2017, he posted to r/askphilosophy with the title, "The theory of quantum immortality has driven me to a really dark place. I'm living in a state of pure terror. Is there a reason not to believe it's true? Can it be debunked?" In the thread, everyone told him that quantum immortality was not a real established theory. It was just a thought experiment. Almost definitely not true. One user said there was no evidence for it. Another said it was science fiction. Others tried to explain that even if many worlds was true, it still would not automatically mean personal consciousness works the way he was imagining. But AFH43 kept pushing back. He kept asking why it wasn't possible. He kept saying it seemed logical to him. He argued that if the universe was infinite, then there would always be another version of him somewhere. in some branch, still alive. The more people tried to reassure him, the more he seemed to spiral around the same question. But then he kept posting. He posted an r/ask science discussion. The possibility of quantum immortality is making my life unbearable. Is it a credible theory? He posted an r/ask philosophy, asking if multiverses means people never die. He posted another thread asking whether an infinitely large universe meant there would always be a version of him that never died. Some people gave him actual answers. Some people were patient, some people were blunt. Some told him directly that he was treating a speculative concept like a fact. Others urged him to step away from Reddit and get help, because this was clearly causing him distress. He started posting in advice and mental health spaces, saying he was in an existential crisis and that he could not make the thoughts stop. In one post, he said the idea made him feel like he would always be alive, and that this was ruining his life. He also talked about depersonalization and derealization, which are mental health experiences where a person can feel disconnected from themselves, their body, or reality. In February of 2017, he made a post titled, "Quantum Immortality. I'm killing myself soon. It's too much. I can't do it anymore." After that, the account went quiet for a long time. But in 2019, AFH43 came back. It's really strange because all his posts and comments after the one mentioning self-harm are deleted, but none of the ones prior are. I'm not super sure why he would do that, but regardless, the later posts have been preserved through retellings and update videos. In one of these posts, he explained that nearly 3 years earlier, he had woken up one morning and felt like his mind had broken. He believed quantum immortality meant he would never be able to die, and that he would be in endless suffering forever. After posting about hurting himself, he really did have an attempt at ending his own life. But afterwards, he was able to receive the psychiatric treatment that he needed, and he started taking antipsychotic medication. He was slowly putting his life back together. But in April 2022, he posted another update saying that he was still alive, but that he was in the hospital for mental health reasons and struggling badly again. He said he had since been diagnosed with OCD, which made a lot of his earlier obsessive spiraling make a lot more sense in hindsight. Since then, there has been no major update to the story. Nickelodeon Hamster Wheel. Nickelodeon Hamster Wheel refers to a post made by user Sheshu Chariot on r/glitch in the Matrix in December of 2017, titled "Humans Walking in Hamster Wheels." In the post, OP says that when she was around 16, she came home from hanging out with friends, got food, and turned on Nickelodeon in her room. But when the TV came on, it was not a normal Nickelodeon show. Instead, she says she saw a black, white, and gray live-action scene of hundreds of unclothed people walking in a line over hills in the background. In the front of the scene were giant hamster wheels. Some of the people were directly inside the wheels, walking endlessly. The rest were slowly walking toward them. OP described the people as robotic and lifeless, like they had no expression or awareness. There was also a cold, wind-like whistling sound in the background. At first, she thought maybe it was some weird short film or bumper that Nickelodeon had decided to air, but the longer she watched it, the less it made sense. The scene didn't really progress. It just kept repeating in a loop. People walking toward the wheels, people already inside the wheels, and nothing else happening. After a few minutes, she changed the channel. Almost immediately, she realized how strange it was and flipped back. But when she returned to Nickelodeon, SpongeBob was playing, and not just starting either. It was in the middle of an episode, as if it had been playing for a while. As if the hamster wheel footage had never been there at all. She checked nearby channels to see if she'd been mistaken about what channel it was, but she couldn't find that video anywhere. According to OP, this happened around 2005, and she tried searching for it ever since. She could not find a short film, a commercial, a music video, or any record of anything matching what she saw. The next day, she reposted the story to r/tip of my tongue under the title, "Creepy TV, Nude Humans Walking Toward and in Hamster Wheels, Possible Broadcast Interference, Early 2000s. Some thought it was a broadcast signal situation. Basically, someone somehow hijacking or interfering with the TV feed and airing something that was not supposed to be there. People brought up the Max Headroom incident, where a TV broadcast was famously interrupted by a masked figure in the 1980s. Others pointed out that Nickelodeon was a cable channel, which means that interference would be harder and rarer, so it wasn't likely. Another possibility was that OP had seen an experimental short film, maybe something from a collection of weird computer animations, surreal art films, or one of those strange clips that sometimes aired between shows in the 90s and 2000s. And another suggestion that came up was The Mind's Eye, a series of early computer animation videos that sometimes aired on TV, had that strange, uncanny, experimental look. But even people discussing that comparison pointed out that it doesn't really match the key details. Huge hamster wheels, the line of people, the black and white look, the SpongeBob switchback, and the feeling that the footage was repeating. Other people thought it might have been a dream, a false memory, or OP accidentally mixing together multiple things she saw as a kid. And then there were the people who said they remembered something similar. Few users in the comments said the description brought back vague memories for them too. Not always a clear memory, but a feeling that they had seen something like it. Some described it almost like deja vu, reading the post and suddenly picturing the exact same scene, even though they could not name where it came from. Of course, that doesn't prove anything. That could be the power of suggestion. OP's description is vivid enough that people may have felt like they remembered it because they could picture it so clearly. But years later, in 2024, another Reddit user named Damn Halo posted a very similar memory to r/tip of my tongue. They also remembered turning on Nickelodeon, expecting something like SpongeBob, and instead seeing a black and white video of unclothed people walking up a hill toward hamster wheels. They also said that when they changed the channel and came back, SpongeBob was playing near the end of an episode. The post was marked solved after someone linked a TikTok about the original story. That didn't actually solve the footage, it just connected the new user's memory back to the old Reddit post. When someone asked if they had seen the old post, Damn Halo said they did not remember seeing it and guessed it could have been interference or something like that. So as of now, there's no confirmed video and no confirmed answer. Personally, I think the most logical answer is that the original post was just an inaccurate memory or something along those lines. And the second one was either someone copying the post to keep the memory alive, or they had read the post, forgot about it, and then imagined some weird similar memory. Whatever the case, I find it extremely unlikely that this weird film actually played on Nickelodeon, even if it was just for a few minutes. Jimmy C. Demon refers to a deleted Reddit story posted by u/the_restless artist in an Ask Reddit thread titled, Serious, What's Your Unexplained Experience? The story starts when the narrator was around 19 or 20, living in Savannah, Georgia. At the time, he says he was not doing great. He was working day labor jobs through temp agencies, waking up early, working long hours, making very little money, and drinking heavily after work. One morning, he was supposed to go into work, but decided not to. Instead, he called his girlfriend and told her he wanted to go to Tybee Island and spend the day at the beach. They packed fishing rods, got in his van, and drove out there. But before actually going to the water, he decided he wanted to stop at a bar across from the beach and have a drink. It was still early in the morning, so the bar was basically empty. He and his girlfriend sat at the bar with one empty stool between them, which is just kind of weird. Then a man walked in. Instead of sitting literally anywhere else in the bar, the man sat directly between them. Narrator describes him as someone who looked normal at first, but started to appear wrong the longer he looked at him. He had short, spiky hair with bleached tips, expensive designer clothes, a Prada leather jacket, nice boots, gray eyes, pinpoint pupils, slightly sharp teeth, and fingernails that seemed just a little too long and pointed. First thing the man did was start moving his fingers across the bar like little legs, almost like they were skating. This stood out to the narrator because he used to do the exact same thing when he was bored in school. Then the man looked at him and said something like, "I noticed you're a man who pays attention to detail. I'm also a man who pays attention to detail." After that, he started talking to OP's girlfriend. He told her she was beautiful. He told OP he needed to pay more attention to her. He talked like he knew things about the relationship that he should not have known. OP says that normally this would have made him angry. Some random man sitting between him and his girlfriend, complimenting her, criticizing him, and acting overly familiar. But for some reason, he stayed calm. Eventually, he looked at his girlfriend and told her she needed to leave. And according to him, she did not argue. She looked like she understood, got up, and went to the coffee shop next door. Once she was gone, the man turned to him and said, "You were supposed to go fishing today." Then he pointed toward the beach and said that if the narrator had gone fishing, he would have drowned him in the ocean. The narrator asked him who he was. At first, the man answered in a language that OP did not understand. He said it sounded vaguely Arabic or Hebrew, but he couldn't place it. So OP asked him to say it in a way he could understand. The man replied, "You can call me Jimmy C. I jumped off the San Francisco Bridge years ago, and we've been watching you." From that point on, according to the story, Jimmy C never referred to himself as I again. Only we. He said things like, "We see you taking a bath," and that they wished they could feel the warmth of the water and the steam. He talked about watching the narrator at night. He described the feeling of something crawling up his back. At the same time, he kept buying him drinks, mostly whiskey sours, like he had endless money. Eventually, the narrator decided to leave. But before he did, Jimmy C told him to look outside at his car. Outside was a Volkswagen Beetle. Jimmy C asked him what the license plate said. It said, "Fierce." Then, Jimmy C told OP that the next time he saw him, he would be driving a black Mercedes, and the license plate would say, "Utopia." OP left, picked up his girlfriend from the coffee shop, and they drove away in silence. Eventually, he asked her if she knew what that had been. According to him, she immediately said, "That was a demon." The strange part to him was that his girlfriend was not religious. She came from a very analytical, science-minded family. They were not the type of people who talked about demons or ghosts. Somehow, that was the word that they both landed on. After that, the encounter stayed with OP. He said his girlfriend started having nightmares about Jimmy C staring at her, and he became obsessed with black Mercedes. Every time one passed him, he would look at the license plate. Even if he saw a black car in a movie or TV show, he would check whether it was a Mercedes. Years passed. His relationship ended, his life changed, he moved away, and eventually, he started wondering if he had remembered the whole thing wrong. Maybe he'd been drunk. Maybe it was stress. Maybe the man was just a weird stranger and his memory had turned into something bigger. Then he remembered that his girlfriend had kept a journal. So years later, even though they'd ended on pretty bad terms, he reached out to her and asked if she still had the entry from that day. She did. And according to OP, her journal matched his memory to the T. He'd even written some of it shortly after leaving the bar, while she was sitting in the coffee shop next door. After the story was posted to Reddit, it got attention pretty quickly. People were debating whether it was paranormal, fake, exaggerated, an ARG, or just a strange encounter with a very observant person. Because Jimmy C said the next time the narrator saw him, he would be in a black Mercedes with the plate Utopia, some Reddit users started checking whether that car actually existed. One user claimed they searched vehicle databases and found a black Mercedes in California with the exact personalized plate. Now, this doesn't prove the story happens. It could be a coincidence. It could also be someone misreading a database or whatever. There's so many explanations, and utopia isn't exactly a rare word. But according to later Reddit post, the car was not just a black Mercedes with the Utopia plate. It was also connected to California and later appeared to have been serviced near San Francisco, closer to the same place Jimmy C had claimed he died. Again, none of that is independently verified in a way that proves anything. That is where the story settled. So, if you're in California and you see someone driving a black Mercedes with the license plate that says Utopia, maybe you can solve the mystery. The Edgy Cat Lady. The Edgy Cat Lady, more commonly known as the Crazy Omegle Cat Lady or Omegle Cat Killer, is a story that is absolutely insanely disturbing. In April of 2020, a Reddit user named GamerGirl362 made a post on r/MadeMeCry titled Crazy Omegle Cat Lady. In the post, they said their friend had been on Omegle using the internet tag furry when they came across a woman showing extremely graphic animal abuse content involving cats. This included strangling them, setting them on fire, and poking their eyes out. This is just disgustingly disturbing. I don't care what anyone says, doing something like this should carry the same charge as if you did it to a human. It's just pure evil that shouldn't be around normal civilization. And people like this don't just change. But anyway, the post claimed that this was not just one Omegle shock video. According to the early Reddit post, the same person was allegedly appearing on Omegle repeatedly, using animal-related tags and showing graphic content to unsuspecting people. So the story obviously spread fast. People started calling her the crazy Omegle cat lady. TikTok accounts allegedly connected to the person started being shared around. People claimed she was posting schedules for when she would be on Omegle, haunting people to find her and using the attention as part of the game. Because the internet had already seen a major animal abuse manhunt with Don't Fuck with Cats, people immediately made the comparison. A new hunt started. Reddit threads popped up, Discord servers formed, TikTok and YouTube channels started covering it. People were trying to identify the person from usernames, screenshots, background details, social media accounts, locations, and anything else they could find. Some people were genuinely trying to gather information for the police. Others were posting rumors, threatening people, spreading unverified names, or trying to dox anyone who vaguely resembled the person in the video. The r/out of the loop thread from the time gives a pretty good snapshot of how confusing it all was. People were asking what crazy Omegle cat lady even was, why certain subreddits had gone private, and why the story was suddenly everywhere. The answer was basically, people had seen or heard about the Omegle videos, a TikTok account was allegedly connected to them, and a bunch of online groups were now trying to identify the person. One of the more well-known videos about the case is The Omegle Cat Killer and How the Internet Found Her, which focuses on a group called Broken One Way and their investigation. According to the video, a person called Senpai joined one of the public discords, realized the whole thing was a disaster, and helped organize a smaller group to collect information more carefully. The video claims the group used public posts, background details, social media connections, possible locations, and other clues to narrow down who the person was. Eventually, private citizens did gather public information, and that information eventually helped law enforcement. The real person authorities identified was Crystal Cherica Scott from Kokomo, Indiana. In July of 2020, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Indiana announced that Scott had been arrested and charged with 2 counts of making and distributing Animal Crush videos under the Preventing Animal Cruelty and Torture Act. In 2021, Scott was sentenced to 30 months in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. The DOJ said she had posted Animal Crush videos across social media platforms, and that she had obtained animals from unsuspecting people who believed she was going to care for them. In 2025, the DOJ announced that Scott had been ordered back to federal prison after violating the conditions of her supervised release, including a rule that prohibited non-incidental contact with animals. I personally hope that she ends up in prison for a long, long time. I don't think someone like this is magically going to become a better person. I think they should lock her up and throw away the key. Just my opinion. And that is it for Tier 4 of the Disturbing Reddit Post Iceberg, and thus the end of this video. Thank you so much for sticking around until the end. Next Sunday, July 5th, I will be posting a video covering tiers 5 through 8, so please be sure to subscribe if you want to see that. It's going to be a much longer video with much weirder and more disturbing entries. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you again soon.